64 Tacos Podcasts presents Is This Song Good? This is episode 18, Ben Uncle Soul, Seven Nation Army.
Hi, welcome back to the Is This Song Good podcast series. This time we're doing another covers song version. And so I picked the White Stripes song Seven Nation Army, and the cover is by Ben Uncle Soul, sort of funk soul artist. That I'm not actually very familiar with. And so this one was kind of just like I was looking around and saw this and listened to it. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. Different take, different style. And so I'm interested to hear what you guys think about it.
So I liked it. I thought it was a neat take on the song. It definitely brought a different feel to the your very stripped down bluesy electric guitar song that Seven Nation Army is, and then gave it some soul and funk, and kind of got you moving a little bit as you were listening to it. I thought it was a neat rendition of it.
I think this is another in the category of did something completely different with the song, and I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's the only way to make a good cover, but it is a reason for it to exist, whether for good or ill, I don't know. But in this case, I think it's for good because it's not a song that I would have thought would have slide neatly into the sort of like funk type soulful category. That's just really not very Jack White-ish. Tortured is probably as close as he gets to a soulful, but or sounding pissy. That's another thing that he likes to do, which is great. I love Jack White. I love the White Stripes and Raconteurs and everything else. But I thought it was completely different, and that's great. And it made me sort of think about how well the sort of really simple melody, that sort of iconic riff, how well that translates. It kind of makes sense in a way that it would go into sort of like a like an R&B-ish sort of song, because like that's a genre that's all about vamping over like a groove, and so it's got a very distinctive, I wouldn't call it a groove in the original, it's more of like a riff, but they're just sort of like dancing around that, and I think it works pretty well. I wouldn't say that I loved it. It was a little, I wouldn't say that it was it's not cheesy is completely the wrong word. That's not what I meant. It's nice. It's almost a little gimmicky, and that's just maybe how I think about that genre of music a little bit. Like, we'll add a little bit of fun to this, and it's a bit of a weird combination, but which kind of makes it interesting and great. So like that's not necessarily a bad thing, but for me it's missing the sort of wildness that the original has, and I also love just overdriven, distorted guitar stuff, and of course it's missing that.
It started out. The first couple times I heard it, I was like, "Oh yeah, this is kind of cool." What are they doing here? They're kind of turning the whole thing on its head. And then the more I listened to it, the more I started to dislike it, because it. And it's not that I don't like the song. It's just that it made me appreciate the original a lot more.
I can relate to that too.
Yeah. But one of the things that we talk a lot about, or we've talked about in the past before, Dan, is how Meg White's drumming in the White Stripes is kind of a little bit, it's not it's not perfect. Yeah. It's kind of like, it kind of shifts around a little bit, and
Well, she's not a good technical drummer at all. Like she's an amateur, and somehow it works because of
It definitely
the
works.
crazy
And
wildness of this recordings.
yeah, as I listened to this cover, I was like, this sounds too perfect. It sounds too calculated. It's like they're exactly hitting where they're supposed to hit, and I need it to not do that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of this strange, like, as much as I sort of rag on Meg White's drumming, it's like, you're right,
Yeah.
it does fit with uh with the White Stripes and with what Jack White does with his, sort of raw emotion and his guitar work. And with this cover, I it lost that. Like, it took that out of it. And so it made me appreciate the original more. And it's not bad what they did with it. It's kind of neat in its own right. But I'm not exactly like going to seek this out and want to listen to it more. And maybe I would throw it on like a covers playlist, to just kind of mix things up a little bit. Like, oh yeah, I know that, the riff, I've heard that before. And it just kind of pops out. But yeah, like the more I listen to this one, the more it just sort of kind of tanked for me. The initial impression I got of it lost its magic, and the original kind of started to bubble up. And the original, I've always loved it. It's just that it was always kind of like the hit radio single from the White Stripes.
It's their biggest song, I think, without a doubt. It's like a stadium, staple now. You go at a sporting event, you're going to hear it at some point,
Yeah. That's interesting though, because like I totally agree that the White Stripes version is better, and if I'm gonna pick one, that's the one I'm gonna pick. But I really appreciated the technical accuracy of the cover. It was like, oh, finally everything is where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Now that said, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna listen to the White Stripes version and love that infinitely more. But it was really refreshing to have that organization and structure in a song that I love so very much. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
And it's funny because Meg White's playing went from, this is classic, like hipster, it went from being like, oh, isn't it great that the drummer isn't like concerned about technique and it's all about emotion to they became popular and it was, oh, Meg White's such a technically deficient drummer. It's really, it's like, and there are songs of theirs that I actually find it distracting. I'm like, no, God damn it. Could you just been a little bit better there? Because it's hard to not hear it. I mean, and Dave, you have this too. I mean, you've been in bands with us, but like, if you play, and you even played the drums back when we were, teenagers, but if you play the drums,
a drum set and made noise with it. Yes.
I've heard you play a couple of songs before you quickly shifted over to the microphone, but yeah, but you're playing on John Allen when we wrote that first song back when we were like 16 was as technically like proficient as much of the recorded stuff. Now that said, could Meg White lay down a better drum track if Jack White wasn't like, nah, fuck it, we want it to be raw in one take? Probably. I don't think she's like a actual awful drummer. I think that's part of what Jack White was looking for. And maybe that's just taking advantage of the limitations and being like, if we make it all sort of immediate and garage and sloppy, then it doesn't matter if I have a drummer who's going to nail everything. Because he's a good drummer. He's played drums in Dead Weather, I think he plays drums in, and he's a much better drummer than she is. He could have just recorded that stuff himself. I think he wanted that sort of looseness, but I do sometimes find it distracting in some of the songs. But sometimes some of the songs that like her sort of like, I'm going to bash away at this ride cymbal as hard as I can, just create a wall of sound. Or, I'm all like, my right foot and my left hand and my right hand are going to hit things consecutively. It's like complete caveman bonehead drumming, but it's like perfect. It's absolutely perfect for the song. So I think it has its drawbacks and its merits. And it is like, to me, when the Black Keys came out, I was like, oh, it's the White Stripes with a good drummer. which is sort of like a shorthand version of what the Black Keys are. And of course, that's unfair, but at the same time, would I rather listen to the Black Keys than the White Stripes right now? No, the White Stripes is more memorable and distinctive, and that's probably down to songwriting as much as anything else. But at the very least, Meg White doesn't interfere with your ability to enjoy the songs, even if she is a very poor, in the realm of drumming, she's definitely on the bottom tier of as far as like talent. But it doesn't ruin the White Stripes. Occasionally, it's like, come on, but like for the most part, it's really effective.
No. She's the drummer that the White Stripes needed so that Jack White could do whatever he wanted.
Yeah. It gave him license for his bizarro solos and like noises and his, like $15 guitars that needed to be properly grounded, but nobody ever bothered to do it. So they're, squalling and feedback and all this stuff. So you're right.
Right.
It works for what he was trying to do with the band. Yeah. And they together it works. Absolutely.
She's never going to be hired by a professional musician to be the studio drummer in their album recording. So
So to sum it up, fun little cover, but it doesn't really hold a candle to the original for me.
I agree. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed listening to it, but I'm definitely going to listen to the original if I'm listening to Seven Nation Army.
Yep. So for votes, we're saying yes, it's
a good
song. Cover. Okay. Yep. Yes, it's a good song.
It's a good cover. I like that it diverges from the original. That's like Dan said, it's not required for a cover to be good, but I think you're more likely to get me to enjoy it if you do.
Yeah, it's more arresting.
You've got to do it right. You've got to do it right if you're going to do it. That was the other thing.
Yeah.
But so yes.
I give it a marginal passing grade.
Yeah, like, is it a good cover? It had, like you said, Zach. It's fun at first, and then you're like, okay, you've worn your welcome out a little bit. Like, and not to say that if it popped up 2 years from now, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's this cover, and I'd listen to it. So yeah.
Sure.
It gets by. But yeah, it's not. I just feel like it's missing. I don't know. Like, what was he trying to do? Like. He was trying to make something different, and he succeeded, and it's interesting, you know. But yeah, it doesn't really, it doesn't have any of the power of the original, and it's also, it's I find that sound to be utterly forgettable, pleasant but utterly forgettable, like that whole genre of that sound of music. I'm always like, oh, this is pretty good, but then I don't care, like. It's not something I hate, but it's not something I get excited about either. I think that's where it kind of falls short for me. Although it is fun to hear it to be completely different than the original. I think that's its best virtue.
Yeah.
All right. I think that wraps up our podcast this week. Next week we're going to continue the covers, and we're doing a song I picked, and I'm going to continue with my theme of early 90s grunge songs covered by music legends with Johnny Cash's version of the Soundgarden song Rusty Cage.
And your theme of songs that sound nothing like the original.
Yeah, no, that's true too. So yeah, tune in, look for that next week.
All right.
I caught it on audio.